approval of the agenda, we have the motion. I need to take the vote. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. And adoption of the council meeting minutes of February 16th. Councillor Rudenberg, so moved. Councillor Elliott, second. Anyone got comments or questions? Anyone opposed? Great, that motion is carried. And we will go straight to item K4, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is certainly not the longest report that I've ever written, but it is an important one. The purpose of this report is for council to appoint Ron Richard to the position of fire chief for the municipality as per the City of Quesnel bylaw number 1685 of 2010, with the recommendation that council hereby appoints Ron Richard to the position of fire chief for the City of Quesnel effective immediately.
So can I have a motion to that effect? To Councillor Vic, Councillor Runge. Now I have to say, as the incoming fire chief, where's the uniform? I mean, it should have been bells and whistles.
I know, I'm sorry.
You
I was
know,
actually gonna do Zoom tonight.
I know you got fire practice tonight.
I do.
We've got the motion on the floor. Any questions or comments from council? I think folks have let Ron know how excited we are about this. So Ron, on behalf of council, you know, we are excited. I know the reputation that you've garnered in our community is very strong in the capacity that you've had to date. And we look forward to your leadership over our crew. And there's that mix of, you know, the small staff, but then all of those volunteers. And I'm sure that our volunteer complement is just as excited to have you take the lead role over there. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
A few words, like what stamp are you going to put on? How much money are you going to save us? All that stuff?
Lots of money. Yeah. No, no, you know, thank you very much. I'm truly honored, and you know, the response and the encouragement I've received from our members and city staff and the public has been overwhelming. So yeah, I'm just, you know, I'm just very happy to finally reach this stage of my career, and to do it right here in my hometown is you know, overwhelming. So again, thank you.
And
we'll do right by Chief Gauthier as well, right?
yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And if I may add, Mr. Mayor, Ron has also previously been appointed to be the Director of Emergency Services. That did not require a council appointment, so that's not brought here, but that was done at the same time as the fire chief appointment.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. Congratulations, Ron. And let's do an all in favor this time, so everybody can put their hands up. So that vote is unanimous. Thanks, Ron. And I know you're going to be off to fire practice, so go and get back slapped and all that fun stuff over at the hall.
Thank you very much for moving this forward. I appreciate that. That's excellent. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to committee reports, Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first report this evening is a review of the February 24th meeting of the North Cariboo Seniors Council. A lot of what was discussed I've already brought to council before, so there's only a couple points that I'd like to bring to light. The first is the NCSC definitely conveyed their gratitude regarding the recent MOU signing. The money is flowing, and they've already got to work on their key initiatives regarding, first of all, hiring and administrative staff support. Second is pursuing their meal program again, and a snow removal program. So those projects are now off and running. The second thing I'll bring to light is Dr. John Fine, who is a member of that society and the board, wanted to convey to the council that the intention of Northern Health was to have all individuals over 80 years old to be vaccinated for COVID by the end of March. And they were seeking, Northern Health is reaching out in the community and including the NCSC to look for volunteers to help get seniors to vaccination stations. And I guess we're going to see more to come on this, but it was pertinent to seniors in the community that was the first sort of benchmark. in terms of vaccinations. They wanted to see all seniors over 80 plus finished by the end of March. And then the final piece on the North Cariboo Seniors Council, which is a very special announcement. And that would be that officially the city of Quesnel is now recognized as an age-friendly community. We got notification in early February, and I want to thank Ms. Hartley there for helping keep that rolling. There was a gap because of COVID and a change in government, so the names changed and whatnot. So there was a bit of delay, but I'm very proud to report that we now, as a community, have that designation in British Columbia. The Age-Friendly BC Recognition Program is a partnership, of course, between the Ministry of Health and the BC Healthy Community Society, and it also is recognized by the World Health Organization. To that end, the Ministry of Health is going to push our recognition beyond just provincial. They're going to submit this to the federal government to be recognized by the Public Health Agency in Canada. And to the end that we will be recognized pan-Canadian as a age-friendly community. So we have something to be proud of there. We have a beautiful seal that we can use where we feel is appropriate in our messaging to the community, and that is part of your agenda package. And I think that's a tremendous achievement for us and great recognition for Quesnel. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any questions, Councillor Rudenberg?
Thank you. Congratulations on the designation. That's been a long time coming. So good work between you and the council. In regards to the volunteers, asking for volunteers to get the seniors to their vaccination, might I suggest that your organization gets in touch with the Rotary president? She has been talking to Northern Health around how we might be able to help as Rotarians with the vaccine rollout. And most of us do have the RCMP piece that we need for working with seniors, vulnerable people, and children. So they might be a good jumping off point for some volunteer drivers.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll definitely advise Dr. Fine of that offer. He didn't elaborate on who was spearheading this effort to get seniors transportation to these stations, but I'll definitely make that known to him. Thank you.
Yes. So if nothing else from council, a couple of quick things. One, on the vaccination piece, let's sort of walk that slowly. Our CAO is going to be invited to a call with the Chief Public Health Officer responsible for the vaccination rollout. So we'll be able to brief council on what that looks like and what we're in dialogue with Northern Health corporately around spaces, etc. So, you know, I think Dr. Fine is presumptively giving the Seniors Council a heads up that it's going to require some volunteers, but the actual organization of that whole process is with the public health officer that's got responsibility for this. When I was on the call with the Minister of Municipal Affairs, you know, she mentioned that as a local government, we're going to be asked to play a role as well. So we'll keep everybody, including the community, apprised of how this is officially going to roll out. As you all know, it's been in the news day over day over the last little while as it evolves. The second piece is I've chatted with Councillor Vic because I think we're at a transition stage now with the Seniors Council. Councillor Vic's been doing what we've asked him to do, which is to give us ongoing reports, because the Seniors Council, of course, is a legacy of last council and the work we did with Northern Health to structure it. Our intention was to get a standalone council. We now have a standalone council. Because of the COVID funding, we've been able to equip that standalone council so that we know that it's going to have some longevity and legs and resources to it. And in that MOU, we have an annual report. So we now have a formal relationship with that organization where we're going to be getting annual reports from them. So I've asked Councillor Vic to switch more into kind of the liaison roles that others have, like Councillor Runge and others, where he'll just bring forward to us where council needs to engage. So things that we need to be writing, you know, letters of support for, or areas that the city needs to do some work on. Other than that, then we'll just get the annual report. And I think that's the right stepping back. Councillor Vic will still be fully engaged as a liaison, but in terms of because I think they're meeting at least monthly, right, Councillor Vic? Yeah, and so we don't need to know their business on a monthly basis. We just need to know where we need to continue to provide assistance or where we need to use our role as a city council. So, so you'll see that relationship change as it ought to because it's evolving. Okay. So with that, great. Next report then, the Financial Sustainability Audit Committee, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. The purpose of this report is to provide council with highlights from the most recent FSAC meeting on February 16th. As far as the COVID Restart Grant, the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee reviewed the current summary of the COVID Restart Grant. The committee discussed funding the part-time bylaw officer from the COVID grant in 2021, since bylaw has assisted with many COVID issues. The committee also discussed council's desire for more strategic communication with citizens and putting some funds towards getting an appraisal of the city's current communications and to look at various software for citizens engagement. Committee also discussed allocating $100,000 for continued work with vulnerable people, food security, street supports, etc. Instead of just the $10,000 already allocated for the food security, and that the executive committee would decide on how these funds would be allocated. And I'm just going to read the recommendations at the end. The operating budget, we discussed feedback received from council and the public on the operating budget, and the committee discussed the different issues of tax shifting. That recommendation will be below as well. And then surplus, the committee reviewed the first update on the surplus. The final surplus will not be known until the end of February. There will be a significant surplus due to the following reasons: spending not able to occur due to COVID, and training and travel are perfect examples of that. Spending not occurring due to direction given by directors, managers to watch their spending and delay any spending not required. And spending not occurring due to a position not being filled and changes to the landfill. It was recommended from staff that some of the surplus be used to address long-term financial challenges facing the city, and that some be used to reduce taxation. In addition to the recommendations below, staff have recommended cutting $50,000 from the training budgets for 2021 due to COVID, and then relook at all the training and travel budgets in 2022 in light of how things have changed due to COVID. And hopefully we get back to normal by then. So the recommendations from the COVID Restart Grant recommended moved from Councillor Goulet and seconded Mayor Simpson, that the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee recommends to council that the following allocations be made from the COVID Restart Grant. $45,000 for the halftime bylaw officer currently in the budget, $50,000 for strategic communications, and $100,000 for continued work with vulnerable people, examples being food security and street supports. And I would move that recommendation.
Seconder, Councillor Goulet. Questions or comments? Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. Good work, you guys. Way to find that money. So in regards to cutting the staff training budgets, is that also taking into?
Sorry, Lori, just you've only got the recommendation. So we're in a bit of a weird spot. I want to, Carrie, if you could pop your face on here. What this is, sorry, Councillor Elliott, but what this is kind of the background stuff to the operating budget we're dealing with tonight.
Right. Yeah.
So in the adoption of the operating budget, these refinements are reflected in there. So go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, they are in there, but these are the building blocks. Normally these would have come before the operating budget. So it would be nice to get these.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
for Carrie's sake, and because of the kind of the logical progression as to how we got to the operating budget, it's better to deal with these as they are. So the recommendation you have in front of you, Lori-Ann, just now, is only dealing with the how we're funding the bylaw officer, the strategic communications, and the vulnerable people. So the question you're raising is not to do with that particular recommendation.
So I can speak to that
Yeah,
in
once
the
we get
next
to that
report.
recommendation.
Okay, it's just a basic question, but thank you for
Yeah.
that clarification.
I think I saw Councillor Paul. Did you have your hand up?
I did, yes. A question regarding the COVID grant. And that is that in view of how much of our proposed 2021 budget is supported by COVID dollars, and if no more COVID dollars are forthcoming, I'm just worried, or I'd like to know if we're going to expect to have a big hole to fill when we go to prepare our 2022 budget.
So again, Councillor Paul, that's a question for the operating budget. So you only have a motion in front of you just now for some allocations that are behind the operating budget.
Okay, so what I should do then is hold that question until we get into the discussion on the actual operating budget.
Yes, about what happens forward. But please do recall, we've had substantive conversation about the immediate utilization of the COVID funding and how it's being used. These are just refinements to that, but ask the question about the overall operating budget going forward during the operating budget, okay?
Okay.
So right now, the recommendation is from FSAC, 45K to cover the halftime bylaw, 50K for strategic communications, and 100K earmarked for the continued work with vulnerable populations. Okay, so and I have that motion on the floor. Are there any further questions about this recommendation from FSAC? Seeing none, anyone opposed? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as far as the operating budget itself, moved Councillor Goulet and seconded Mayor Simpson that the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee recommends to Council that Council stay with the current 3-year tax framework and look at revisiting it again at the end of the 3 years in conjunction with all of the city's other financial pressures. And I'd move that recommendation.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Goulet. And this is in reference to the question coming out of the operating budget discussion about, do we want to revisit tax shifting? The Finance Committee looked at that and said, no, we don't believe that is appropriate. We should stay with the 3-year tax framework. So that's what that's specifically addressing, which has the light industry tax shifting embedded in it. Okay, on this motion, any other questions? Anyone opposed? Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Are we in year 2 of the 3-year program?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Councillor Elliott.
I'm sorry, did we take a vote on that, Mr. Mayor?
All right, anyone opposed? Okay, go ahead.
So, and the last one being the surplus, moved Councillor Goulet and seconded Mayor Simpson that the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee recommends to Council the following allocations to reserves from the 2020 surplus funds. Any surplus in the solid waste, I'm sorry, I apologize. Any surplus in the solid waste fund, approximately $340,000 to a landfill capital reserve, formal reserve to be created. The grant to the carbon reserve, approximately $40,000. And any unspent funds for bridge maintenance, asphalt patching, approximately $137,000 go to the capital reinvestment reserve. I'd move that recommendation.
Seconder, Councillor Runge. Okay, so the basic principle behind this is where the savings are accrued, that's where they go. So any other questions on this? Okay, anyone opposed? Right, and then the final recommendation?
There's actually 2, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
The next one is moved by Councillor Goulet and seconded Mayor Simpson that the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee recommends to Council that $260,000 of the surplus from 2020 be used to reduce 2021 taxation by approximately 1.5%. And I would move that recommendation.
Seconder, Councillor Rudenberg. Questions or comments? Anyone opposed? Okay,
And finally, move Councillor Goulet and seconded Mayor Simpson that the Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee recommends to council that any remaining surplus be allocated to the Tax and Community Stabilization Reserve. And I'd move that recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
seconder, Councillor Runge. Any questions or comments? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay,
And then lastly, the 5-year financial plan policies. The committee reviewed the first draft of the 5-year financial plan policies and suggested some changes that we'll have conversations on in the future here.
yeah, so the rest of it will deal in the actual operating budget itself. But as Carrie indicated, this is kind of what framed how we got to where we got to in that. I want to thank the committee for this and for Carrie. This was a bit of work for the committee. There was a lot of moving pieces. But in particular, I want to, on behalf of council, thank the staff because I think we should really understand that when we were doing our, let's call it our COVID budget, when we were revisiting that budget and we chose to hold the line, direction was given to staff to look at wherever they could accrue savings, things that didn't need to be done this year, could delay, etc. And that's what's behind us. Now, one of the things I will say is FSAC and myself, we've asked staff hard, are any of these ongoing incremental savings? And that's something that you'll see when we get into the operating budget. They're really delayed projects or delayed work, etc. Other than a few areas that Carrie's going to point out that we're looking at a similar situation potentially 2021 that we're going to suggest that there's other savings that we could accrue. So kudos to the staff and kudos to Finance Committee for doing this hard work on this budget. Okay. Anything else on the Finance Committee? Okay, back to you, Councillor Vic, for executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This committee report is from the econ meeting that occurred on February 18th. I want to thank the committee for plowing through another lengthy agenda that was varied as well. We'll start with the upcoming community engagement. And this goes along with what Councillor Elliott was talking about in his report regarding communications. Ecom examined what the next level of communication and engagement in the community might look like in the near future. And as part of the Safe Restart Grant, Council will consider, which we just voted on, a budget to engage an expert in strategic communications. So some ideas that we percolated on, there's a need to better integrate communications of our projects and strategies. For example, the city website landing page could be improved by allowing people to drill down through multiple layers to learn more about an issue or a situation. And we need to continue to find better ways to tell the story graphically and through video. Next, we talked about the NCLGA resolution deadline for March 15th. And I have to say that it's come to light that that deadline was actually February 26th. So that deadline has passed. We did have one tentative proposal brought forward by Councillor Rudenberg regarding an interesting concept where the federal government could consider subsidizing landing fees, which would be beneficial both for regional airports such as our own, as well as to carriers. That idea can certainly be advanced to UBCM or FCM. So that idea doesn't have to die on the table. And although the deadline is passed for NCLGA resolutions, resolutions can still be brought forward to UBCM. So council shouldn't be discouraged if this opportunity is passed. We still have other opportunities if you'd like to advance a strategic resolution to UBCM. Next, we discussed a remote worker strategy and recruitment topic. And remote workers can be defined as workers that may have a skill or expertise that allows them to work from home. Basically that work can be done anywhere. You can live anywhere and do that work. The committee agreed that keeping an eye on the remote worker concept was appropriate, but adjusting our resident recruitment and workforce attraction strategy to discreetly target remote workers was premature, as we have ample evidence that some of our major employers in the community are suffering through vulnerabilities of recruitment and retention. So it makes sense that we need to address those issues first. Next, we discussed shovel-ready strategic investments. We heard from Mayor Simpson about the need to develop the next round of strategic investments in our community. We've done a tremendous amount of work, this council and prior councils, in advancing projects to a shovel-ready state to get ready for those opportune grant moments. It was agreed that an inventory of potential projects needs to be created. We may have opportunities that exist in advancing different components of the waterfront strategy and other community amenities. In a post-pandemic world, governments will be looking at supporting growth, and communities such as Quesnel must have shovel-ready projects that go beyond the concept stage. So we need to do some work on this. Next, we discussed the food hub. Within the context of food security in Quesnel, executive discussed the challenges many nonprofit groups encounter with properly staging and executing food distribution activities, especially when it comes to storage. The opening of the new food hub, which is Sprout Kitchen, may present opportunities for collaboration between those working on food security in Quesnel and the Sprout Kitchen. The space at that location, there may have been an opportunity to acquire some of that space to assist with the need for storage, but the cost of renovating that space and making it usable would require a huge grant to do that. So that has been parked, that conversation was parked. Next, we discussed the BC Winter Games. City Manager Johnson informed the committee that the BC Games Society had reached out to the city shortly after the council decision was made to withdraw our 2024 bid on February 16th. The society, after learning about the challenges the city had faced obtaining the necessary support, generously agreed to grant an extension to our bid submission until the middle of March 15th. The executive committee directed Manager Johnson to send a letter to the school district, which occurred on February 20th, in the hopes of obtaining the necessary letter of support, thereby hopefully salvaging the bid. Next, we talked about volunteer recognition. Councillor Rudenberg outlined a plan to recognize volunteers, both organizations and individuals. Recognition would occur every month and in multiple categories and would launch in April. This concept would see considerably more recognition in the community of its volunteers by allowing organizations to be more involved in the process more often. There was a recommendation that came out of our ECOM meeting, and it was moved by Mayor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Rudenberg, and resolved that the executive committee recommends to council that Manager Johnson continue communication with School District 28 and the related stakeholders to achieve the support required for the city of Quesnel to submit a qualifying bid for the BC Winter Games, and that was carried unanimously.
Yeah, and I think that's just a reporting out. Council doesn't need to do anything with that. So, okay.
That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Runge.
Thank you, Councillor Vic, for the great report. Question with regards to the Winter Games. Do we have any update? Is my first question to our city manager.
Go ahead, city manager.
Thank you. And the update I would provide is that it's still a work in progress. We are hopeful that we can come to a successful conclusion on it, but it is still a work in progress at this point in time.
And so then my second point is, hoping that it's going to be positive, do we need to have a motion that, because we won't have a meeting before the 15th, that says
We can. So Councillor Runge, I'm just going to leave it because we've got a work in progress. If we do need to have a motion, we can deal with that. We've got the ability to do electronic motions just in time, and then report it out to the public at our next meeting. Okay.
All right.
That way we don't have one of our councillors pinned into an awkward situation that has to go off and then come back in again.
I totally forgot. Sorry,
Yeah.
Tony.
That's okay.
Thank you.
That's all right. I think I had Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the NCLGA resolutions, I did hint some time ago that I was interested in putting in a resolution regarding daylight saving time, but upon reflection, realizing that UBCM is just weeks before the next change in daylight saving time, I thought that it would be a moot point. And I've done some research, and it appears that the province of British Columbia is waiting for California. So basically, as far as I can see, the daylight saving time change relies on California. And of course, everything is being held up by COVID.
Okay. Anything else? Whoops, I lost everybody there. Hang on. I'm back. Just a quick update on the volunteer recognition. We did have our communications meeting, and our communications folks, and thanks to Councillor Rudenberg for working with them. They're pretty excited about launching that program, and we are structuring it in a way that the volunteer community will be giving us all of the content and working with us to highlight the volunteer activities in our community. So it's going to end up, you know, engaging the volunteer community in a very different way to allow them to tell their story and to be able to, you know, get their some profile in the community that hopefully will also get them some more volunteers, as well as recognizing the volunteers they have. So I think it's got the potential to be a pretty exciting program for us to replace the volunteer recognition dinner. Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, yes, there are a billion different volunteer organizations in the community. And so what Laura and I have done is sort of divided volunteer opportunities into different categories. So you might have 1 month that recognizes youth sport. You might have another month that recognizes, you know, things like Rotary and the Elks and like, so community organizations. So we've got 11 different categories that will be posted. And so, you know, each month will be done sort of a month in advance. Like the mayor said, it's up to the volunteer organizations. It'll be an online form to fill out, really easy. And then we'll be moving forward every month, recognizing those groups as they give us their information. And if within their own organization, they want to recognize someone specific, that's on them. It is no longer a competition or a contest. It's up to each individual volunteer organization to do that. Just to go back to the NCLGA piece. So I was in communication with the president of NCLGA this weekend, and she had said, well, if you can have it done by Monday, because I guess their deadline was, you know, they were meeting Monday to go through them because they have to hand them off to UBCM, who then goes through them for them and does all the preamble stuff at the bottom about, you know, this resolution has been brought forward and this is, you know, how it's related to other resolutions, et cetera. So given the scope of what the resolution is around airports, which is a federal issue, I was looking under the FCM because we were going to forward to FCM anyway. And because it addresses a municipal federal issue, it's probably a much more direct route to do that piece. I mean, we can bring it to UBCM, but I think we need to send it to FCM. And you know, when we do that, what I will suggest that we put on there is not only just FCM, but we have a BC caucus so that they can advocate for this. And UBCM sits at that table too. So you've got two members, the president and the first vice, who sit at the table. And I would also send it to our MP, just so he knows where we're headed. So I think that, you know, we missed that opportunity with NCLJ because it's, you know, it would be nice to have that support, but it is definitely a federal issue, and FCM is probably the way to go. So I look forward to working with staff, and I believe the city manager is going to get me working with the airport manager to get this resolution crafted properly.
Good. Thank you. Anything else on exec? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Vic. With respect to the CRD board highlights, it's there for your information. We did have a good update, as you'll see in here, from the two MLAs, MLA Oaks and MLA Dirksen. And so we got a sense of what they see as the priorities and what they're working on. And then they had a good engagement with the CRD board. The rest of it, as you'll see, was a pretty heavy regular business agenda for the CRD. So if there's no questions there, we can move on to staff reports. Okay. And over to you, Director Bolton, on the operating budget.
All right, so the purpose of this report is to seek council's approval of the updated operating budget for 2021. So as you recall, the draft budget was brought to a special open meeting on February 10th. The Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee reviewed the feedback received from council and some public input and has made some recommended revisions to the budget. The FSAC committee also reviewed the potential surplus and recommended some surplus to reduce 2021 taxation. So the draft of the operating budget has total taxation of $17,192,950 with all the supplemental requests built in. This is a 2.5% total tax levy increase over 2020 after $172.80 is taken from the tax stabilization reserve to fund one-time supplementals and $390,020 used from the COVID-19 Safe Restart grant to offset lower airport revenue, extra cleaning costs to support economic development, community marketing, and bylaw. Also included is council's approved policy of bringing the light industry tax rate to be equivalent to the business tax rate over 3 years. The changes recommended by the FSAC committee include, we just spoke about, cutting the training, funding the part-time person through the COVID grant, and allocating $260,000 from the projected surplus for 2020. A total reduction of $355 to the required tax levy for 2021, or 2.1%. Revised assessments will be received mid to late March that will determine the final taxation rates that will be built into the tax rate by law. So the recommendation is that council approves the operating budget for 2021, including the supplementals and allocations from the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant as presented at the March 2nd, 2021 regular council meeting and as recommended at the February 16th, 2021 Financial Sustainability and Audit Committee, and that council directs staff to continue building the 5-year financial plan based on this budget.
Councillor Elliott, so moved. Seconded. Councillor Goulet. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This goes to the question that I was raising a little earlier in the meeting, and that has to do with the COVID restart grant. And my concern is that, and I know that we've been over this ground before, that if in view of how much of our proposed 2021 budget is supported by COVID dollars, and if no more COVID dollars are forthcoming, will that impact future budget scenarios, i.e. next year?
Go ahead, Director Bolton.
Yeah, so for sure, a lot of the stuff funded by the COVID Safe Restart Grant is one-time projects, but we definitely have some weaknesses in the future, depending on what goes on. If the casinos don't reopen and we don't get the casino funds, then we definitely have some challenges on the capital side. And then on the airport side, we definitely have some decisions potentially to make in the future, depending on what happens there. But a lot of the other ones are one-time costs, besides a few positions that we might have to talk about again next year.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I went into the government website regarding this grant, and there is a frequently asked questions page on the COVID Safe Restart Grant. And there's one question in there that says, what is the timeline over which these grant funds must be expended? And the response is that there is no time limit. The province anticipates local governments will use this money through both the COVID response and post-COVID recovery periods. And it says 2020, 2021, and 2022. So that's where I'm sort of getting the feeling that we should be holding some of this money back for a future year.
So Councillor Paul, what would you take out of the operating budget to just use as parked money?
Well, at the February 20, and I don't want to get into repeating myself, but I've got it here, but I outlined some ideas. I will say that I am prepared to vote for this, in favor of this. But if we feel, or if you feel that we're okay, and Director Bolton has indicated that many of the projects under the COVID Restart Grant are one-time projects, I'm okay with that.
Okay, So I think the key for council is the principle that we took with the COVID money is if you never want to see any money again, park it. Right? That was the principle that we took. We can't make the case that we need money, then when we get money, not use the money, proving that we didn't need the money, and then hope that we get more money. Like there's an illogic in that process. I think there's, everything that FSAC's done. We had an entire operating budget discussion where the COVID money was looked at as well. I think, we are using the COVID money not only as the government intended us to use it, but directly related to where we're feeling the COVID pain. The key though in making that the discussion on this operating budget is missing a crucial point. And the crucial point is because our staff took direction from us and managed this year's resources, we are in a surplus situation and having delivered all of the programs that we needed to deliver. And the combination of that surplus situation and looking at what that means going forward is what's put us in such a strong position. Many communities right now are trying to zero out their budgets because of COVID, knowing that in 2022 and beyond, they are going to feel the pain in a phenomenal way. And some of them, I'm not going to be surprised if they start approaching double-digit tax increases just to maintain their services. We are nowhere near that. So I think the combination of council's decision to stay the course and ride this out, the government's 2.5 million grant to us that Director Bolton has helped us to backstop where the shortfalls are, has put us in a position where I would say, other than the vulnerabilities that have been pointed out, the airport and the casino funds, we go into 2022 in a relatively strong position. We're still tracking on our capital plan. We are delivering good quality services to the public, and we're driving our transition strategy. So my take on this budget is it shows a lot of leadership on the part of council and a lot of due diligence and good work on the part of staff to put us in such a good position. So that, that would be my reference point for this. Councillor Runge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I absolutely agree with you. I think we do have to have a lot of thanks to our city staff for making us putting us into the position where we're at now. And with regards to Councillor Paul, I actually would love to actually use up the whole COVID-19 restart, because I agree with the mayor. It's one of those things that, if it's really looked at, the communities aren't using it. I would, if I were a senior government, I would lose it also. My question is, are we actually, do we feel that we're meeting all of the vulnerable things that could happen? Like, my question is, if we find, let's say we open up and we find in August that we're needing more for food security and, street supports, would we be able to then to pull out from that 70 that's left over, and we have that discussion afterwards, or is that kind of that 70 parked until next year?
No, so what's happening is, go ahead, Director Bolton, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, at any time, council can pass a resolution to use the remaining funds. Yeah.
But the other piece of it, though, is that the provincial government is now coming in with grants in various areas. So we're currently looking at a $450,000 grant in the area of supports for individuals who are, on the street or vulnerable for homeless and issues associated with COVID. So they're coming out with more sort of grants that are specific for vulnerable folks. So I think our 100,000 that we've put aside there is really seed money for some of the things we're aware of, but gives us the ability as well to start looking at leveraging some of the other things that need to be done, right? So I think the provincial government starting to step into some of those areas themselves. Okay. Councillor Rudenberg.
Thanks. The question I had was in regards to the taking the $50, the $50,000 off of staff travel and training. And I know you probably have talked about this, just given the fact, even the change when we look at what's happened on the council floor with Gina leaving and people moving into new positions, we're still covering off training for those guys, right? Because I'd hate like heck to have those guys in there and kind of struggle for a year.
Yeah, Director Bolton?
Yeah, we have a professional development budget that we use for those kind of succession type planning training programs. This is really more aimed at the conferences and things like that people aren't attending, that everything's virtual.
Okay, that's really good for the public to know. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mayor.
we're projecting that this year there will remain virtual.
Yeah.
And this year may give us the opportunity to see how much is going to be a kind of a permanent change to some of the professional development going kind of full permanent online, and then conferences. So this gives us a sense of what this year looks like, but the FSAC committee indicated they'll look at it again for the 2022 budget if we are getting back to a bit of a normal. Okay, Councillor Paul, I think I saw you waving.
You did so. I have 4 little questions regarding the operating budget. But before I ask those 4 questions, I have a question for staff or anyone, and it doesn't relate directly to the operating budget, but it does in a way, and that is, has anyone heard if the provincial government is going to again extend the tax due date until I think it was the 30th of September last year?
No.
Yeah. No.
No, okay, thank you. With regard to, and I'm looking at item number 7.0 under budget additions, and that's on page 29 of 111. And it has to do with increases to the FTE, the full-time equivalent count. And I seem to remember seeing something on the UBCM jobs listing that we're looking for a fire inspector. Are we? And why would that not be on that list?
We are looking for a fire inspector because our current fire inspector just got promoted to fire chief. So we need to fill his role.
Okay, thank you. Next question is under item number 12.0, general operating budget on page 38 of 111. And that is development services and planning. The expenditures have actually gone down, but we're hiring a planner. So why wouldn't that number go up?
In our financial statements, that area actually also includes economic development. I'm actually looking at separating it because they're such varied departments. So economic development, as you know, from year to year has quite a few projects ongoing. So last year they had a lot of projects that there aren't quite as many this year. So.
But,
okay.
And this isn't personnel though, is it?
No, this is the full, all costs.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to page 45 of 111, and this is the Forestry Initiatives Fund. And the Fire Smart rebates, we have 0 in there for 2021. I thought that we were getting into the business of paying out rebates.
That would be a question for Manager Robinson. I don't want to answer that, but in the end, that budget's fully grant funded.
Yeah,
So it's in
that's nothing to do. That's just a reflection of how they're operating. It doesn't really have anything to do with our operating budget per se.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine.
Erin's here. She want to ask that question.
Was there? We can't see her.
Yeah, she's hiding, but she's here.
So thanks, Mayor. Councillor Paul, there are 15 rebates scheduled for 2021. That's 15 rebates.
So why doesn't that show in the budget?
Perhaps we didn't have the grant yet.
Okay.
So again, all you're seeing is an accounting mechanism here. So if we're just flowing money through to people. So again, this is a reporting out on something that isn't really our operating budget.
I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Mayor, that it's money in, money out. At the end of the day, it's a big fat 0.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, my last question, and this is on page 52 of 111, and this is under Public Works and Engineering, item number 19.8. And I asked the question, at the last February 10th meeting about this, and it has to do with public service. And I was told that public service is putting up barricades and cleaning up the park after an event and so on. So the amount of expenditure for that particular line item has gone up by $4,500. But we've just heard that Billy Barker Days won't be happening this year. So theoretically, shouldn't that number go down?
We've heard that Billy Barker might plan another event, so we wanted to keep those dollars still there in case something else happens, so that we have funding available for another event.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just so council's aware, when we got the announcement, I did meet with the city manager and director of corporate services to talk about that. It's about $33,000 that we've got sort of earmarked for our contribution and staff time, et cetera, for Billy Barker Days. But as Director Bolton pointed out, Billy Barker Days may hold some kind of an event. And we also thought that we don't know what's going to happen as we get towards September, if they actually do the vaccinations through July, September. We've got a whole bunch of pending good news stuff we want to do. There's trail networks we want to open, the Spirit Center opening. So there's just a bunch of potential celebratory opportunities for us that we thought it best just to leave this alone. And that gives us the room then to be able to look at that budget line item. But if we don't expend it, then it accrues to next year's surplus. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay, so on the recommendation of adoption of the budget as presented, anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion has passed unanimously. And again, thank you to both the Finance Committee and Carrie for your folks as well. So, okay. And next, there's Manager Robinson. She's coming out of hiding. Okay, go ahead with the Forestry Initiatives Program.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So the purpose of this report is to request a resolution from Council to support the Fire Smart on Private Lands project through the Community Resilience Investment Program, that's CRI, in the spring and summer of 2021. As Council is aware, in October, we put our Jobs Creation Program funding application in. Unfortunately, we were not successful with this, so we're now reapplying in partnership with NASCO First Nation to carry out this on the ground work. We anticipate that about 550 hours of person hours will be created and about 70 homes. It says 60 in the report, but we've anticipated about 70 homes will be able to be treated. Those are homes of seniors, elders, and people with limited mobility and vulnerable populations. So the recommendation is that Council supports the Forestry Initiatives Program funding application in the amount of $150,000 to the Community Resilient Investment Program's Fire Smart Economic Recovery Fund for Fire Smart activities on private lands within the Community Wildfire Protection Plan boundary.
Okay, on the recommendation, Councillor Rudenberg, second Councillor Elliott. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? None. There you go. Your work was quick and easy.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next, Union of BC Municipalities Poverty Reduction Grant application.
The purpose of this report is to gain Council's approval to submit an application for the UBCM Poverty Reduction Grant. The Canadian Mental Health Association's Food Security Coordinator approached the City of Quesnel to partner with an application to the UBCM Poverty Reduction Action Grant. The project will provide the resources needed to allow the CMHA to implement a food redistribution pilot program. The components of the project include a planning stage in which the CMHA will engage community stakeholder partnerships and plan the food redistribution network, and an implementation stage. This stage will use the food hub as the redistribution and processing site. The project will take used food and redistribute to community stakeholders such as the Quesnel Shelter and Support Society. This will improve health and food options for residents relying on food bank or other meal support and reduce food waste. The recommendation is that Quesnel City Council supports the City of Quesnel partnering with the Canadian Mental Health Association on an application to the Union of BC Municipalities Poverty Reduction Action Grant for $50,000 toward implementation of a food redistribution pilot program, and that Council acknowledges that CMHA has committed to providing cash and/or in-kind contributions over and above the $50,000 grant.
Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Goulet, second. Questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Okay, next, we've done K4. So Lindsay can stay on and go through the Northern Development Trust application for the bike park.
The purpose of this report is to update council on the status of one of the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program grant applications and to gain council's approval to use gas tax as the contribution to the Northern Development Initiative Trust's Quesnel Bike Park and Rentals project. In October 2020, a grant application was submitted to both the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program and Northern Development Initiative Trust for the Quesnel Bike Park and Rentals project behind the Quesnel District Arts and Recreation Center. The SARP grant was not successful. The NDIT grant is currently being reviewed in the February 2021 intake. However, because the city originally applied to NDIT using the SARP funding as our leveraging amount, the application will need to be revised, and this revision will increase the funding request from NDIT. The recommendation is that Quesnel City Council approves the allocation of $144,415 from the gas tax reserve for the Quesnel Bike Park and Rentals project to match the Northern Development Initiative Trust's Recreation Infrastructure Grant request.
Okay, can I have a motion? Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg, questions or comments? Councillor Paul?
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to vote against this one. I voted for it in the first instance on the premise that it would be 100% grant funded, but I just not in favor of spending $144,000 of taxpayers' money directly on this project.
So, sorry, Councillor Paul, you do know that the gas tax is a grant?
Yes, I do know that that gas money is a grant, but it can be used for a wide variety. I mean, there's not very many barriers around that grant funding.
And you do know that the COVID grant money is tax money?
Yes, I know that, and we've been over that ground before.
We're clear that this is federal tax money returned to us, so it is still fully grant funded, just so that the public is clear that this is not local property taxes going in. This is grant funding underpinning this project. So
yes, I understand that, and
not what you said, though. So that's why I'm clarifying it. It's not what you said. So that's why I'm clarifying it for the public. This is still a grant funded project.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay, on the motion, anyone opposed? Councillor Paul?
And recorded, please.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
And then the zoning amendment for the Quesnel Telecom Society of Friendship Center, and I guess Councillor Goulet will be recusing himself.
Okay, I will just leave, and then do I just come back when you're ready to?
I think actually we just have the bylaw anyway coming up, so I don't, unless you've got an announcement or anything to make at the end. Okay.
No, I not.
So I wouldn't worry about it too much there. Thank you, Councillor Goulet.
Kick him out.
There we go. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Director Turner, wherever you are. There
I
you
am here, sir, yes.
Yeah.
So, thank you. On February 16th, council reviewed the request to create a comprehensive development zone on the Quesnel Tilcombe properties along North Fraser Drive to accommodate the development of a 34-unit apartment in conjunction with the existing institutional and commercial uses on that property. Council has now directed staff to proceed with drafting of the bylaws, which is what we've gotten into and you have in front of you today. This zoning amendment application is the first step, I want to remind council, in the review and approval process and considers use of density and considers use and density of the property. It should be noted that the form and character of the buildings submitted are conceptual at this stage only and may be altered through the application process. The applicant has requested that this be clarified with council and the public. The applicant is requesting that the city only proceed to first reading at this time to initiate consultation and to initiate consultation activities. The reason for this is the funding has not been received yet, and they want to make sure that once they have more discussions with the potential funder, there may be requests to change some of that form and character of the building, and they want to make sure that that gets in front of council prior to moving forward any further. Second reading of the bylaw and setting of the public hearing will occur following confirmation of financing. The development permit review to consider final form and character will be completed prior to the adoption of the bylaw, as shown in the process section below. Public consultation. I do want to recommend that we go forward and just note that how we want to go forward with public consultation. Although public consultation isn't technically required because an official community plan is not, amendment is not required, we still do recommend proceeding with consultation of the different First Nations groups within our community. We're trying to advance our discussions with our First Nations partners. And so it is recommended that the LHTAKO, DENE, Luskus, SDLA, and the Southern Decaf Nation Alliance be directed a referral on this project. And we would recommend doing that early, as soon as, you know, in the upcoming weeks. The recommendation is that council considers first reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 1905 for the creation of a Quesnel Tilcombe comprehensive zone in the bylaw section of tonight's March 22nd agenda.
On the recommendation, Councillor Elliott so moved, Councillor Vic second. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul?
Thank you. I don't know if you'll rule this question out of order, but I'll try it on for size 2, or for size anyway. And I raised this issue at the last meeting with regard to the grade level of the proposed facility, and that related to floodplain. I have another concern, and that is that we have this project sees ground level parking under 4 floors of wood structure dwelling units. And there was an article or a program on CBC the other night about the fact that electric cars seem to have a propensity to catch fire. And I'm wondering, this would be a question to the Director of Development Services, that if anything is being said or thought of out in the planning world about this concern.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Actually, no, I've not. I've heard the concern about the odd car catching fire. I've done some research into that. I find it to be, there's not very many examples of that actually. So I'm not seeing a lot of information on that. Definitely, we have not considered it in terms of parking within a facility. That would definitely be something that would be looked at through the building code. Any kind of storage area, such as vehicles, etc., especially given the ones that have gasoline in them, will need to be considered for possible flammability underneath a building.
Would that be a sprinkled area?
Would that be sprinkled?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this item? Right. Seeing none, anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, can I have a, no, sorry, we received the council information package as is. And then with respect to the bylaw for our last report there, the zoning amendment and first reading of that zoning amendment. Motion, Councillor Runge, so move. Councillor Rudenberg, second. Any further questions or comments? Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. No changes to upcoming meeting schedule, no changes to committee appointments, any announcements or future events? Will there ever be any future events? That's hopefully there will be. Any gallery questions?
There's the rodeos potentially.
Yeah, that's true, Cassidy. I've been having some conversations with them. They are hoping to host a professional event with all the COVID restrictions. So you're right. Anything else? Okay, seeing nothing. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
One event for you.
Councillor Rudenberg, Councillor Vic. Anyone opposed to adjournment? Okay, good. Thank you.
Want me to have my Tesla?
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, staff. Good productive meeting.